Welcome to the Puzzle People Pod. On today's podcast, we're going to be speaking with Ben, the producer of Puzzle People. So today we're going to be not only answering questions about the film and the process of making our film, but also about what this podcast is. It's a great conversation, so we hope you'll stick around. Hey, Ben.
Hey, Emily.
I am doing this 200-piece puzzle today while we chat, because this is the first podcast that we've ever done. And on top of that, I'm a little nervous. And so it'll be nice to have something to keep my hands busy. And I think it's a little bit on brand for what our project is. Can you tell people what we're talking about today?
We want to introduce our listeners to what this podcast is all about. We also want to introduce our listeners to what our project outside of the podcast is, which is a feature documentary film.
So do you want to talk a little bit about who we're going to be talking to and the kind of topics that we're exploring on the podcast?
Totally. So our podcast is all about puzzles. You might have guessed from the name Puzzle Podcast. But we've talked to a bunch of awesome puzzlers. For example, Kat of the Jigsaw Junkies. We're going to talk on being neurodivergent and where puzzling fits into her toolbox. Generally, we want to talk about mental health and how that relates to puzzling.
Yeah, I think also something else we're going to be talking to, we have a number of JPA members, which is they run the Nationals. That's the Jigsaw Puzzle Association. And so you may know a bunch of them, but we're going to be digging into what you can expect if you're speed puzzle curious, if you want to check out an event, but maybe you're a little shy, a little reserved, or you like to know what happens before you go beyond having videos of the events on YouTube. And they do a great job broadcasting all of their events. We're going to have them on to speak and give some personal insight into their process, why they became organizers, and also some of the nerdy stuff that they love, so we can get to know them a little bit better. We also have Sarah Puzzles, we have Karen Puzzles, and we have the grandma of puzzles, Adele, who's a well-known Twitch streamer. And I'm excited to chat with her community because she has inspired a whole new group of people to puzzle with her.
I know we're also going to talk to William and Lisa of the Orange County Speed Puzzlers, who will be able to talk about not just speed puzzling, but what it means to build a community of puzzle swappers, of speed puzzlers, and why winning isn't everything, which I think is a really interesting perspective.
Yeah, I'm excited for that conversation as well. I was going to say that we've gone to a bunch of these events now, and what struck me personally is that there are just so many really lovely people. And part of our frustration with making a film is you obviously can't speak to everyone. So we wanted to also start this podcast to get to know some of the people in the community and give them a little bit of, shine a spotlight on them and their stories, even if they're not going to be able to be featured in our film. So we have a segment that we're going to do called Meet the Puzzler, where we talk to people who we actually spoke with online. Some people were nominated, other people reached out to us. So I'm excited to get to know them a little bit more and to hopefully, expand our reach in the community. Today's podcast is a little different because we don't have a guest. It's just us. But we have gotten a lot of questions about our film, and you may see us at tournaments and events, and you're probably wondering, who are these people? How did they get involved in this? And so I made an Instagram post, and I asked people to write in their questions that they had for us. And so I have a list from the community, what they're curious to know about this project, about Puzzle People. And so I think this is a great way for us to kick off both the podcast and our project. But let's first just introduce ourselves, and then we can go into the indie filmmaking part of this, because I think there's this idea that maybe we're Netflix and we just show up and we have a pile of money and we can do whatever we want and we're going to invade worlds and nationals with like a crane at some point, but that isn't actually the case. So Ben, why don't you introduce yourself so people know who you are?
Yeah, my name's Ben Kainz. I'm the producer of the project, and by project, I mean Puzzle People. That's the name of our feature documentary. I've been working with Emily for the last, I'd say, 10 years almost, maybe. And we made one feature documentary before. This is our second, and we're really excited to dive in. I myself um, am not an avid puzzler, but I am a consistent puzzler. I think I've been consistently puzzling for the last 20 years or so, maybe one or two every year, but really sporadically. I think my favorite puzzles are the big landscapes. I like the variations in colors. I think I get sucked into those. Emily, how about yourself? What's your favorite puzzle?
So I like anything achievable and small. I like puzzles that have very clear sections to them. I recently did a zodiac jigsaw puzzle with cats. I love cats too, even though I currently have a dog. But it was really sectioned out, very like it was very clear what colors were going to go where. And it was just a relaxing delight. And I actually started puzzling again when my partner's family had me over for Christmas. This was a couple of years ago, and they are in Canada. They're in Winnipeg. And his sister had actually told me that she had gone to a speed puzzling tournament and that these older ladies had shown up and just taken the whole thing. And I was so intrigued by that idea and by puzzling that I started to puzzle myself. And now I'm kind of doing it because I have found it's really great for my mental health, which is something we're going to talk about with our project and also on the podcast. I find that it's a really great way, especially when I've had a stressful day, to disconnect from screens, to really focus in on something. It helps me, just kind of helps bring everything down. And lately I've been doing puzzles to podcasts. So I feel like I'm hoping that our puzzle podcast will, you know, be that for someone else. I'll add to that too. I recently found out that I'm on the spectrum, which is not really a surprise. And so it's also helped me hang out with friends in a way that I didn't even think about or realize. It's really easy for me to invite somebody over to puzzle, and I kind of don't have to stress about what are we going to say? What topics are we going to cover? Kind of the things that I think come more naturally to some people. And for me, I've realized are a bit of a struggle. So, yeah, puzzling has been helpful with that. It feels like it's given me a way to connect with people without having to feel so anxious speaking and how long will this take and all of that.
Totally. Well, I think we got a little sidetracked. Do we want to actually talk about what the film is and
Yeah.
why we got into this in the first place?
Yes, let's
Um,
do it.
all right. So our film is called Puzzle People, or at least that's the working title. And ultimately, it's a documentary on competitive speed puzzlers. And it really resonated with Emily how this quirky hobby became a tool for mental health and conversations around it. So we're not only profiling puzzlers and speed puzzlers specifically, but also how people use puzzling as a tool for mental health.
Yeah, so I think let's just dive into some of these questions that got asked. I think one of the biggest questions, the first question I always get, when will the film be available? Ben, you want to answer that?
Uh, yeah, I mean, we do have an answer, but it's a rough estimate, because we are making a documentary film. It's always a guess. We don't actually know what's going to happen in real life, but it's our hope that we're going to stop filming in the fall of 2026. And so we'll need maybe another 6 months after that point to edit it all together. So we're targeting a release for the early or the late winter to early spring of 2027.
Because the question of where can we watch it is one we get a lot. Let's talk a little bit about the fact that we are not a big company like Netflix, and let's shine a little light on what it means to be an indie filmmaker. So let's talk about where we are right now.
Well, yeah, I think let's tackle this together. But as indie filmmakers, it just means it's in the name, we're independent. We are creating the schedule. We're funding things by ourselves. We don't have a big business backing us. We don't have, the CEOs you hear about from Netflix or Disney that are green lighting the project. We've taken it upon ourselves to say this is a good idea, and we're passionate enough to get it done in our own time, and hire the crew and get the equipment and show up when we're needed. So I think that's what indie filmmaking is all about. And I don't know what got you into indie filmmaking, or why choose this path?
I think one of the benefits of being an indie filmmaker is you're able to make sure the work you make is something you feel good about and that you're passionate about. A lot of times, as filmmakers, as a professional, you get mandates. And I have worked in the commercial world, Ben has worked in the commercial world. And a lot of times, what that means is we're working with clients. And it doesn't mean our clients aren't good or fun to work with. But at the end of the day, the work is theirs. It's not ours. And so if there's something that we feel passionate about including, it doesn't really matter because it's not our work. And I think similarly, when you have a big studio behind you, it's a double-edged sword. You have a lot of resources that you don't have as an indie filmmaker, but you also don't have the freedom to make the art the way that you want to make it. And with our last film, we got a lot of notes from people that were in the industry that ultimately I don't think they resonated with us, and I think Ben and I are both very proud of the film we made and the integrity it has, and part of the way it was able to keep that from beginning to end and be really special and make sure everyone who was in the process, from the participants to the people behind the camera, feel really good about it, is because we had that freedom to make it the way that we wanted it to be.
Yeah, and I think to that point, and kind of giving a bigger distinction between what indie filmmaking is and what sort of your big studio filmmaking is, specifically in the documentary sphere, is to your point, we get to choose the subject matter, and I think the mandates you spoke of, like those are really ingrained in what kind of projects the bigger studios will greenlight. Does it have a celebrity attachment? What's the story? What's going to get people in theaters? Obviously, we're thinking about that too, um, from an indie film perspective. Like, what's the audience appeal? Who is this going to resonate with? But the difference is, I think the monetary value is much more significant at a big studio level, meaning like if a celebrity isn't attached, there's likely they're not going to get millions of people in seats, and they're not going to get their money back because they're a big studio and they need things to be at a big scale. And for us, we get to pick projects that are smaller and niche and more fun, more lighthearted, maybe a bit more out there, something that's a bit more of a gamble, because we, feel passionate about the subject. We feel passionate about the people in the film, and we're willing to take that risk.
I think that's a huge pro, being able to tackle topics that you don't necessarily think a big studio would be interested in. But now let's talk a little bit about what makes it hard to be an indie filmmaker.
Yeah, so it's obviously money. It's finding money to make the project, and then on the back end, it's making sure that your film is not only good quality enough, but finds the right audience to make ticket sales. You have to work within those two parameters. I mean, the studios do the same thing. They're always making sure that they spend just little enough to make money and ticket sales on the back end. It's always a risk, but indie filmmaking, we're putting that risk on ourselves. So our whole goal is to um, spend enough money to make the film a very high quality production now, while finding the right audience and cater the film to that audience in an effective enough way where people go out and want to see the film enough where we can make a living off of it, because it's uh, the sad truth is not a lot of people are these days. It's a very select few who can continue to work in film, and make a living.
Yeah, I think that's just a fact. I also think that one of the questions we get, and this is kind of around the short film, is why not just put it on YouTube? And we've been talking about how it's going to go to a film festival, and we're really excited about that. And part of it is, with the podcast, we're basically trying to build the resume of the project. So because we're indie filmmakers, because we're not just, backed by a huge funder, we're looking towards independent ways of funding it, be it grants, people who want to contribute, et cetera, et cetera. And by going to film festivals, by getting awards, by even just being accepted into film festivals, it shows that we are good filmmakers. It validates this project and shows the interest from a film community and a professional community, and it basically will help contribute to it getting made. So at film festivals, there are opportunities to meet people, to speak about the project. And even though we're going with a short, because we want to make a feature, we're able to say, not only is this a great short that we've made, but we have something more coming, and we hope that you'll be interested in it. So that's really what we're trying to do now.
But also to that point, we go to film festivals and we show the film off because we want critics to talk about it. I don't know about you, but for me personally, I do check out film reviews either after I've seen a film or before. But I definitely will keep an eye out for something in the newspaper or online about a film. And if there's enough buzz, I'll go see that film. And so the same applies for our film. We want that buzz from the film festivals. If we just put it on YouTube, we would have to generate the buzz ourselves. And that's a really hard thing to do when people are putting YouTube videos out there every single day.
The other question that people had was, will it be available in Europe? Which, I mean, I want it to be available in Europe, but I think maybe this is a good segue into, do we want to shine some light on how distribution works?
If you can shine a light on how distribution works, I'd love to know because it's a grand mystery. I don't think anybody has it figured but likely it'll be in Europe. The thing is, it's like all these places across the world are separated into markets, and some people control those markets and they have connections to theaters. And so you want to get in touch with those people, and then those people get in touch with other people. Somehow your film gets out there. So, yeah, our thought is to eventually get it to Europe. It's just pretty far away from now, so we don't have an answer exactly if and when and where.
These are problems that we have not solved that are for future versions of ourselves to solve. So for the short term, we hope that you'll follow us on Instagram, because we've really been using Puzzle People Doc as a way to share this journey with you all and kind of give you some insight into what is going on with the film and with us, so that way you have some understanding. It's not like, wait, I heard about this thing 2 years ago. What's taking them so long? We want you guys to understand the process and why things are the way that they are. And I think to that point, let's talk a little bit when it comes to a documentary. Like, let's talk a little bit about how a documentary is made, because it isn't scripted. So we're not actors. The people in the film are not actors. So how is a documentary different from a narrative when it comes to getting it off the ground?
I feel like this is a good question for you to answer yourself as the director. You're the one shaping the creative, right? So, um, do you wanna start us off, and maybe I can fill in the gaps?
Sure. Although I will say, I think Ben doesn't give himself enough credit, because he definitely contributes quite a lot to the creative, and also our editor and everyone we work with. Every film is a collaborative medium. So that's what makes it really special. From the director of photography we work with, we all kind of shape the film. And I think the most fun thing about documentaries, because there's no roadmap, you have this group of people, your producer, your director of photography, and if you're lucky enough to have an editor already attached, you're able to bounce ideas and talk about story and talk about structure and talk about things that you're interested in. And so with this project, it kind of starts with a germ, right? Like, wow, look at this. There are these professional jigsaw puzzlers. Maybe we'll make a competition film about the competitive jigsaw puzzlers. And then we start talking to competitive jigsaw puzzlers, and everyone is so nice, and they're not interested in killing each other or winning in a way that other people and other communities are. And so suddenly you're like, I don't think it's really genuine to tell a story that pits people against each other or has like a lot of drama, because in this community, everyone is really friendly and welcoming and kind. So, like what else is here? And then as we start talking to people, we start hearing about, how puzzling is something that's helped them reconnect with joy, reconnect with themselves, allows them to put their phones down and have less screen time, is a huge part of anxiety management, is something they do for their mental health, or if they're neurodivergent, it's something that they can zero in on and it helps them recharge. And so here we are hearing these themes come up, and suddenly, as like I'm getting more into puzzling and I'm doing it, I'm feeling those things myself. And before you know it, you've gone from a very sellable commercial competition film to a wacky, quirky film that I am now going to be part of that talks about my own journey with puzzling and my own mental health, as well as the other participants in our film. And I think that's what's so exciting about the process of documentary is even now we say this, but it's still changing. Something can come up and an idea can, come our way that we're open to. And, we'll definitely be open to exploring that in a way that if you're a narrative filmmaker, you're not going to be able to explore.
Yeah, I think we do a lot of figuring it out on the fly, which ultimately also happens in scripted. But I think the amount of things that are changing in a scripted um, narrative film tend to be about clothes or scenes or dialogue, where I think what we're talking about is more about character arcs and people who we include and important moments in someone's life rather than like very minuscule, smaller things. And it's funny because I think Emily and I do this in a lot of ways just by watching films and talking about it and seeing what else we can use as a good guide, like comparative films that like have done something similar that we think is a good idea. For example, we're really interested in a movie called Spellbound. For those that don't know, it's a documentary film that subjects eight or 10 different kids that all go to the Scribs National Spelling Bee contest in Washington, D.C., profile these kids, and then you see them in their um, competing to see who the best speller is. But that is obviously much more than just those who spelled. It's kind of a deeper dive into the kids' like socioeconomic background and who has the privilege of education and what that means, and all these opportunities that exist for the kids outside of the spelling bee through the spelling bee. So I think that's a good example of like one way we're looking at this film in particular.
I think Spellbound is a great example on how we can use a competition structure to give our film a backbone. Because with a competition, you have a beginning, middle, and end. And regardless of how people feel about winning, or just showing up, or just coming to make friends, whatever their goal is, you have this structure built in. And then what that allows us to do is it lets us play a little bit more, where we can bring in this mental health aspect, where we're not only exploring my personal story, where I talk about getting this diagnosis. And also, I had a pretty severe anxious breakdown. And that's what led me to ask this question around mental health. Having come out of that, am I better? Because we don't have the same sort of metrics when it comes to mental health that we do when you get a cold or a flu. And it's like, it's past, it's over. With mental health, when you have severe anxiety, depression, and when it's up to you to sort of manage your mental health, if you've been in that severe place, it's very hard to trust yourself again. And so part of this other part of our film, we want to talk to experts, specifically female experts, around not only mental health, but neurodivergence. Because typically the people that get talked about or the models around mental health and neurodivergence tend to be white and male. And that obviously excludes a lot of people, myself included, which is why I believe I was diagnosed so late. And I think that that is really exciting that we are able to kind of play with this language of film that's been established using this very well-known competition film, and then bringing something new in with the science and the first person aspect. So that's kind of how we're approaching it. I think that's a pretty solid what our film is about, unless you have something else you want to add.
Yeah, I mean, some people might be asking us now, like, well, why puzzles and why mental health? Like, why are you jamming those two together? And I think the answer is like, there's been some anecdotal connection between people who puzzle, people who use it as a tool to manage their own mental health. And so Emily's question of like, has she healed her brain, started as we started to do this puzzle project. And I think our ultimate thesis, or the question we're asking, is like, can puzzles be the tool to help Emily heal her brain? Like, is that going to get her there? Or, is there going to be a different conclusion? I think that's what we'll find out when we start speaking with our mental health experts.
Yeah, and to that point, as we were researching this project, and I'm sure many puzzlers have already seen this, but there's some evidence that puzzling helps with people who may have dementia or be at risk for dementia, and so intuitively it makes sense that puzzling is good for your brain because it's working this, motor skill, fine motor skill, picking pieces up, putting them in. It's also working memory. You have to remember what goes where and all of that kind of stuff. So we're excited to dig in, I think, to the science. That's a little bit of a new territory for us. That's unexpected, but very fun. I think it's worth mentioning too that something people can do for $0 at all that really helps us is just simply follow us. Follow our Instagram at puzzlepeopledoc. Tune in for these podcasts, share them with your friends, help us expand the community and the network of people who know about this film. Because the bottom line is, even us having a large audience can help us in the future when it comes to making this film. There's a higher likelihood when it comes to distribution that if we have an audience built in and people think, oh, wow, people really want to see this, that we'll be able to get it in theaters and get it on Netflix, hopefully.
Yeah, if you're in Utah and you're like, hey, I want to see this film, let us know. If you're in Canada or if you're in the UK or somewhere else, let us know, because I think those are all it's important for us to know that. It's important for us to know who you all are so we can make sure that this film speaks to you, because that's our goal. We want to make sure that our Puzzle People project speaks to the puzzle people.
Exactly. I think we should wrap things up first episode by asking people to hit us up if they have any other questions about how filmmaking how the process. If I think everybody knows, you have a camera, you shoot. They know it's not scripted, but if there's anything that we brought up that you want us to dig a little bit more into, please let us know. You can send Ben an email with all of your questions. Ben, give the people your email address.
Yeah, it's Ben at chickenwingpictures.com. That's BEN at chickenwingpictures.com.
And I think our last order of business is, should we tell people what Chicken Wing Pictures is and why we are Chicken Wing Pictures?
Of course, we have to. I mean, it's people are going to have questions about it.
Of course.
So, like I said, Emily and I have worked together almost 10 years. And the very first project we ever worked together on is Buffalo, New York. And I was just starting as like a coffee getter and a PA essentially. And Emily was the director of this project, this commercial project. The first day we got there, the crew was deciding where to eat for dinner. And, being in Buffalo, we thought, well, we got to have buffalo wings. And so we went to this bar and they had all these choices of spiciness level, your classic, your hot, medium. And at the very bottom, they had this, the hottest level, just like as sort of a challenge, it's too hot for you, you can't eat it. And so, we all joked that we should get it. We got a big plate of it. And, no one is eating these wings. They're way too hot. And I ate like 2 or 3, and one of the crew members was like, how are you doing this? I was like, I don't know. It's fine. Like, I like spicy food.
I think Ben is underselling this part of the story. I think people were getting very riled up and being like, that PA is crushing these hot wings and it like kind of became a low key spectacle. Like, it's not like anyone was chanting his name, but in general, like people were impressed. People were impressed.
It was listen, it was spicy for sure. I was trying to play it cool because it was the first time that I was working with these people. I didn't want to scare them off.
What ended up happening, so Ben has this incredible wing performance, and months later I got called I worked at an advertising agency full time, and our boss was looking to hire somebody in a sort of junior producer position, and Ben was one of the candidates, and he asked me what I thought about Ben. And to be honest, the only thing I remembered, because it was like months later, was that wing situation. And so I just told our boss, I was like, Ben crushes wings, great guy. And I don't know if that's what tipped the scales in his favor, but I know he got the job. And then we ended up getting to work together professionally uh, after that. And that was in 2013. And then when I was interested in making this short film that ultimately became our feature, Jazzella, Ben was kind enough to sign on, and that was our first sort of like indie film experience that we did together.
Yeah. So basically, I owe my whole career to chicken wings, and so we naturally had to call our production company Chicken Wing Pictures.
Yeah, and something that you guys probably don't know, but production company names are they range anywhere from just completely ridiculous to slightly pretentious. And we always have said that we want to be like down to earth. We want people to like realize we're not, I mean, we have no ego. We don't want to be like jerks. Like that's just not who we are. And so something about the humble chicken wing just felt really right for our name.
It's the people's appetizer, you know?
Yeah.
Anybody wants a chicken wing. And, you know, now that they have cauliflower wings, I think those work for a lot of people too.
Yeah. So that's it. This is the Band-Aid has been ripped off our first Puzzle People pod. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. There's, as always, if you have any feedback, if you want to get involved, if you want to be featured, if you have a great story for us, you have Ben's email, and you can always find us on Instagram at PuzzlePeopleDoc. And thanks for tuning in.
Yeah. Talk to you next time.
That's it. We hope you enjoyed our first Puzzle People pod, learned a lot about our film and this podcast. And as always, if you have questions, comments, want to get in touch, please do. You can email Ben at chickenwingpictures.com, or you can send us a DM on Instagram. We're at PuzzlePeopleDoc. Full disclosure, I run the Instagram myself, so sometimes I miss messages. It doesn't mean I'm ignoring you. Just be patient. But yes, we hope you enjoyed today's conversation, and we hope you'll be back next week for a new episode of the Puzzle People Pod. Until then, happy puzzling!